Hey, everybody. Happy Thursday. Okay, so one of my commitments as we're kind of going into the new year is to be more available, I guess, to show up a little bit more regularly and to be going live on this page. I want to make sure you guys can hear me. As we're kind of okay, good. And so we're going to be starting a series called Thursday Thoughts. And this is really designed to grow you, to grow your business, and just an extension of what we kind of do in Hey Girl You Can in our community. But to be able to show up here live versus in a lot of the private groups and things like that. So right now I'm streaming onto Facebook. Hopefully I'm going to figure out how to be able to multiple stream onto YouTube and LinkedIn so you'll be able to connect there, but also really want it to be where it's something that you can show up and engage and comment and watch live. And so, back in the days of Clubhouse, I was getting to connect with everybody at least twice a week, sometimes three times a week through our rooms and engagements. And obviously that platform has really, really changed. So we're not really using that anymore. And one of the disconnects then now is that I'm really only connecting with you guys through email, which is not, it's great. Don't get me wrong. I love to be able to share things. Just dropped an email this morning with some great, like a holiday hub resources, a video on how to nail your 1 minute intro, some feedback. We're looking for feedback for events. Our January networking event, like email is great, right? But there's nothing different. It's very different than being able to talk live one-on-one and being able to take comments and things like that. So, one of the questions that or I don't even know if it's a question, but something that comes up a lot when I'm mentoring and coaching women, and I've recently been seeing this a lot on my Facebook and on social media, which is why I thought, well, this will be a good topic to kind of kick off our series with, is this idea of happiness. I either get people who are like, I'm just not happy. Like, have you ever felt that way? I mean, I felt that way, right? Like, I'm just not happy. Why am I not happy? I'm like searching for this happiness. Or I see people posting, I've just never been happy, or I just don't feel happy. And, I think we can all agree, at least here in the US, my microphone too, so you guys can hear me a little bit better. At least here in the US, and I really do think, worldwide, we have this like crazy, crazy mental health issue going on, right? Where people are really, really struggling with their mental health. And so I think some of this comes from this, I'm not happy, right? I mean, this is why people leave their marriages. They're not happy. This is why, sometimes people leave their children. They're not happy. Certainly people leave jobs. They're not happy. I mean, it can cause a lot of really not great things. So you guys know I'm a wordy. I'm like, all right. So the first time somebody said this to me and they said they weren't happy and we were doing some coaching and I thought, you know what? I need to go back and kind of really look at what does it actually mean to be happy? When we say we're trying to be happy, what is it that we're actually trying to achieve? So I did a little research and I'm gonna read this to you. The word happy, and this kind of surprised me. And so so let's start with this. I want you first to think about when I say happy, to be happy, to feel happy, to be happy, what do you equate that with? What do you think of? Like, what would that mean to you? Look, I'm curious, like put in the chat. What does that mean to you? Put in the comments. Like what do you think of when you think happy? Right? Um, because to me, when I said when you think happy, I think of a feeling. I think of a feeling of like, oh, I'm really content and joyful and peaceful, and I just feel so good. I guess happy in my mind equated to a feeling, a good feeling. So that was what I kind of expected when I looked up to be happy. It must be like, how do I feel good, right? And this could go into, if we're talking about a feeling, this could go into, why we have problems with like self-medicating, right? With like drugs and alcohol and things that maybe aren't super healthy, we're looking for this feeling, this happy feeling that we feel like we're not experiencing. And we also, I think, have this idea that, happy people feel happy all the time. Why don't I feel happy all the time, right? So I was really shocked, okay, when I looked it up. It said so it's from the late 14th century. And what the word happy actually meant, like the original word to be happy was lucky. It was lucky, favored by fortune, or being advantageous in circumstances or events. It was luck. Happy was luck. And I thought that was crazy. And so it kind of this the it later became this idea of being very glad, of being pleased and content. But it initially didn't mean that. Um, this is what I really like. It says, whether it was from the Greek to the Irish, a great majority of the European words for happy at first meant lucky. The only exception was in Welsh, where the word first meant wise. If you were happy, you were wise. And as I started to like really think this over, this to me was pretty wild. And I want you to think about this, because can you do anything to be lucky? Like, can you actually make yourself lucky? Now, I mean, you could certainly, like, if you work with my friend Corey Michelle and all of her energy work and stuff that she does, I mean, she certainly would be like, yeah, you could manifest yourself some luck for sure, right? So I'm not talking about like manifesting here. I'm not talking about manifesting luck. We tend to think this happy is this feeling that I'm searching for. Lucky isn't even a feeling. Right? It's a circumstance. It's just that things worked out for you. You were lucky. And so that's what happy means. And so with that definition, it's like, huh. And even wise, when you think wise, do you think happy? Like those things don't necessarily go together. You could be really wise, really intelligent, really smart, and still pretty discontented. Right. And so when I went back and really understood, okay, we use this word happy and we throw this word happy around. And most of us then are left feeling unhappy, feeling like there's something wrong with us. Why don't I feel happy? And I will say, as a woman, my sister and I, my sister-in-law and I have been talking about this a lot. Like, as a woman, our feelings change every 28 days. Right. Like sometimes we're loving life and sometimes we're like not. I was saying I think there it would be interesting to see if there was a study, and I don't know if there's been one done. So if there is, please share it with me. For people who struggle with mental health, particularly when it comes to things like um, somebody who takes their own life, where they fall in their cycle as a woman, and if they could find a correlation between high risk days versus low risk days. I think if somebody knows that study, I'm really curious about that, because I would bet that there is a correlation for women, at least, on their menstrual cycles and their hormones on higher risk days to self harm versus days that wouldn't be. Um, and I think it's because we're driven by the society of our feelings. And so one of the phrases I use a lot is that feelings are fickle. How we feel is fickle, it's fleeting. Our feeling is just, it's a chemical that runs through our body, produces this feeling. It's not even based in fact all the time, right? And it's often the way we experience that chemical reaction is really based on the thought that we attributed to that chemical reaction. So, there's this thought cycle, if you've ever heard this, and we've done some deeper training on this, but the thought cycle is basically you have a thought first. The thought creates the feeling. We tend to think that our feelings create our thoughts, but it's actually the opposite. It's the thought that creates the feeling. The feeling then drives us to take action or inaction, which then leads us to some kind of result, right? And that result then creates a new thought. And then from that thought, we create this feeling. And most of us grow up, at least I'll claim for me, I grew up thinking that my feelings then influenced my thoughts. But it was really, there were a lot of steps that I was missing in there. It was my feelings were influencing my actions. My actions were then creating a result, which then was influencing my thought. But if I could go all the way back to the beginning, it started with my thought. And the way I really started to begin to understand this is that if you think of a roller coaster, right? And so you get a feeling around a roller coaster. There's a chemical reaction that happens into our body, but it's the thought that we use to describe that feeling, which will then determine what we think about roller coasters. So if our thought is, this is really fun, this is really exciting, then that chemical reaction that we're experiencing, we consider fun, exciting. If we think this is terrifying, I'm going to die on this roller coaster, then we take that chemical reaction and the feeling we associate it with, even though it's the same thing, is fear. So I thought that was really fascinating. Now, guys, obviously I'm not a researcher, I'm a sciencer. I just love when they can kind of go back in and say, okay, this is the science of what's happening. This is why you're experiencing this. This is, why you're thinking this, that kind of thing. And so I think we start with this thought of this happy, I need to be happy. And then it creates all these feelings in us of what I'm not having in this lack. And it's really based on a misunderstanding of what happiness is. Happiness means the energy behind it. And this is why I love words, because it's going back to what is the energy? What was the original intent? If we think of words as powerful, that words create. Now, as a Christian, I strongly believe that God spoke the world into existence. It was, He said, let there be light, and there was light. And I also believe that I and you are made in the image of God, which means that if God was powerful enough to speak the world into existence, that our world, our words and the words that we say are just as powerful. There's actually tons of research behind that. I was recently watching a video and they were talking about they put this girl was sharing, there was a research study, I forget who did it at Harvard or something, and they took people and they put them in a room and they had them play a game. And with one group of the people, they said, you're going to be playing this like Wall Street game. And so they went in and they played this game, and it was like money and property and sharing and stuff, kind of like reminded me of like maybe Monopoly, but it wasn't Monopoly. But they said, okay, you're going to play this Wall Street game. But the other group, they played the same game and they said, okay, you're going to play this community game. And simply by whether or not they thought they were playing a community game or a Wall Street game, even though it was the exact same game, they played it differently because of the word that was associated with it. Because the word community has a different energy behind it. It creates a different feeling in us when we say community versus when we say Wall Street. You get a different feeling when you say Wall Street, right? So our words are so incredibly powerful. And we know this if anybody's ever said anything to you. And I know for me, people have said something, people I love, have said things to me that were so deeply, deeply hurtful, you know, um, deeply hurtful. And that is the power of words and why we have to be so responsible with the words that come out of our mouth and what we say, because something said in a moment of anger can never be unsaid. It can deeply wound somebody else. Often in the domestic violence world, and you guys know that was my history years ago being married. Often the emotional and psychological abuse is sometimes more damaging than the physical abuse because a broken bone will heal, but those words like live in us forever. And so going back to happy, it is a word that has energy behind it. And the energy was luck. We cannot create necessarily luck. I mean, I guess you could say kind of manifest, right? But that's a really different feeling. So I said, okay, so if it's not really happy, if happy really isn't the right word, then what are we actually looking for? And I'll tell you what I kind of came up with. So the first thought that I had was joy. I thought, well, we're really looking for joy. Now, joy is from the 1200s, and it actually is. It's a feeling. It's a feeling of pleasure and delight. And I think when we say happy, what we're really looking for is joy, this feeling of pleasure and delight. But then as I started to kind of go down that rabbit hole, I thought, well, I don't know if that's great because our feelings are fickle. Our feelings can't be trusted, right? And gosh, any of us who've ever dated somebody and we were in love, and then later on we realized who that person really was, I think we can all venture to say our feelings can't always be trusted. It's going to let that sit there for a minute, right? Um, and I will preface that there's a difference between a deep knowing and alignment. And we can talk another time, actually, later on today during the Hey Girl You Can Q&A for our members. This will be one of the questions that we'll be answering. We do a Q&A. So in Hey Girl You Can, we get 4 events a month. And one of them that you get is a Q&A. And so one of the questions is, how do I know like when I have to make a choice? How do I know if this is the right or the wrong choice? And so we're going to be doing some training on that in about an hour, actually. Um, and so these feelings are just kind of like really fickle, right? And so it's different than a deep knowing, a deep alignment, a deep assurance. This is just a feeling. Feelings come and go. We feel different all different times during the day, right? So then I thought, well, what if I'm not looking for happiness or joy? What if I'm looking more for peaceful? Because joy is a noun, peaceful is an adjective, something that describes it a little bit more of a peaceful. And so this also comes from the 1400s. And it said inclined to peace, friendly. But I liked this, that as it moved down into the mid 14th century, it meant tranquil or calm. And so I thought, well, that's something I would really like. I would like that tranquil calmness. What does that feel like? But then as I started digging down, I think the word that really most of us are searching for, which is more powerful than happiness or joy, which is feeling that can be fickle. And peaceful, which is calm and tranquil, but life isn't always calm and tranquil, right? I mean, if you have kids, my gosh, right? You're like, I might have to forego some peaceful and calmness like now forever, forever. We have, yeah, Emily, my daughter's 18 and she's a freshman in college and we're trying to, plan New Year's Eve plans and she wants to go into the like city and we live by New York. She wants to go into New York City. And on a side note, I grew up outside of New York, and so I will always refer to it as the city. And when I went to college, that was challenging because people would say, "Where are you from?" And I would say the city, and they would be like, "Oh, what city? Like Boston?" And I remember being this like 18-year-old kid and being like, "Huh? No, the capital T, the city. What are you talking about? Boston's not the city." But I guess if you grew up around Boston, you think Boston's the city, right? And then I moved to Denver in my 20s and people would talk about the city and I'd be like, "Oh no, no, that's not a city. That's like a downtown." I never could bring myself to call it a city. I'm such a like a New York snob. Like we're so people give, say that Northeast people have attitude. They're right. They're right. Okay, so she wants to go to the city. And I'm like, we can't go away. We can't get on a plane and be somewhere. God forbid something happens to her while she's in the city. And I thought to myself, okay, look, when does that ever go away? If you're a parent, let me know. When does that ever go away? Somebody said, well, when she gets married, then you'll feel like there's somebody else who's responsible for her. Um, but peaceful, you can't always be peaceful. Life is not always peaceful. Life is messy. Things happen, and we have to be able. So, how can we still feel good, experience this joy, this feeling of pleasure and delight and peaceful when things aren't always peaceful? And so the word that I really took, and I'm going to give this to you as my gift to you today, the word to strive for is contentment. Contentment is a noun. Now, this word came out 100 years later. It was the mid 15th century. And the original word contentment meant satisfactory payment. Um, and it initially meant a contentment of a debt, which that sense is now obsolete. We don't use it there anymore, but it meant satisfaction payment. Um, but the meaning, which I thought was really, really great, which comes from an old French word, content. And I'm going to read this to you. It says, meaning that happiness, so that luck, that happiness that we're kind of feeling, which consists in being satisfied with present conditions. And the reason I think this is really great is sometimes we think of contentment is that means that we're not striving for anything else. That means that we don't want anything else. And that's kind of a bad word, particularly Americans, where we're so driven. And it's this idea of having more and more and more and more. And that's a whole other rabbit hole we could go down. But that we shouldn't be content. We shouldn't be content with what we should have. We should always want more, right? How many of you kind of like, we've had that, grown up with that idea? You should strive for more. And when I read this, I thought, that's not actually what it's not saying. It's not saying that you don't desire more. I mean, I think, and Hey Girl, you can, we talk about this all the time. I have this, right? We want to have more impact, more legacy, more influence. We want to feel, I think that most people want their work to be significant. They want to feel that they're making a difference. They want to feel that they're creating something that is bigger than them. Now, not everybody needs that. I know for me, one of my strengths, if you've ever done the Clifton Strength Finders, is belief. I need to believe that my work has impact is significant, makes a difference. I can't just do something that doesn't. But I think most of us want us to feel like our lives are of value, right? Whether that's within our immediate family circle or within our community, but most of us want to feel that we're important, significant. I think significance is something that's huge for humans, right? So it's not saying content, meaning, okay, I don't need to do anything else. I can just be where I am and stay here forever. I never need to desire for anything more. It means you're satisfied with your present conditions. And I think back to when my daughter was in cancer, going through her cancer treatment. And I have to say, it was probably one of the most contented times of my life. I know that sounds totally bizarre, but when I think about how I felt, there was certainly a lot of trauma with that. So for those of you who don't know my story, I was going through the middle of a very horrific domestic violence divorce. In the middle of that divorce, my only daughter was 3 at the time. We ended up checking in the emergency room. She had stage 4 cancer. She was dying in the emergency room. And she is the one who's now 18 that wants to go to New York. Um, and during that season, uh, we really did not know if she was going to live or die. The chances were more that she probably was not going to survive, quite openly at that time. And so I remember as somebody who grew up my entire life, always striving for more, striving for more. And I lived my life from the time I was a very young teenager. I remember feeling, I will be happy when. I will be happy when I graduate high school. I will be happy when I graduate college. I will be happy when I get my first promotion. I will be happy when I buy my first house. I will be happy when I get married. I will be happy when I have a baby. It was like I was always looking for something in the future that when this happened, I would be happy. And guess what? I was never happy because I was looking for joy. I was looking for pleasure, of delight, and this sense of like bliss that I was just going to live in. And it was very unattainable because there was always something next. And so when she got diagnosed with cancer, I remember sitting in the hospital and there was no to look forward to. I could barely look forward to 2 or 3 days. Like it was literally day by day whether or not this kid was going to be alive. And I was just still dealing with the attorneys and going to court. I mean, I'd literally leave the intensive care unit, go to court and come back. It was such a dumpster fire season in my life. And I had to learn how to be content in that moment because the future was so uncertain. And I couldn't think about the future. I'll get emotional. I couldn't think about the future because the choice was going to be she was either going to live or she was going to die, and I was going to have to deal with it. And I didn't know how I was going to deal with it. And so I just didn't think about it. I figured very Scarlett O'Hara moments of like, I will deal with that tomorrow. I remember the first night that we got there, we got checked in through the emergency room, and they said she probably has cancer. They found the tumor or whatever, and they have us in the intensive care unit. And I fell asleep in the bed with her, in the hospital bed with her, right? So she's hooked up to all these IVs. They had just done emergency surgery to save her life because she was dying in the emergency room. I'm literally she this little tiny, nothing, and I'm laying next to her in the emergency room in the intensive care unit after a whole really long night, right? Being told your kid has cancer. And I wake up in the middle of the night and I was so disoriented. I was like, where the heck am I? Like, I had no idea where I was from what I heard. I remember everything seemed yellow. I don't know why, but I remember a lot of yellow, blinking lights, waking up and being like, what the? And then all of it rushing back to me, like in a moment, and being like, I'm just gonna go back to sleep. I'll deal with this tomorrow. I'll deal with this tomorrow. I can't deal with this right now. And I literally just went back to sleep. And so it was during that season, I had to really, really learn to just be content with those present conditions. And obviously, that didn't mean that I didn't want more. And that didn't mean that I had given up my dreams or my goals or what I wanted for the future, for my daughter's future. But I had no choice except to be completely present in that moment and be satisfied that right now, today, I am happy with you in this moment. Right now, today, I am happy that we are here in this hospital bed and that I get you for right now, that I get to be your mom for right now because I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. And I will tell you, I started a gratitude journal, and that's something we can dive in onto another topic. Really changed my life. Quite full transparency, I've gotten away from that. I thought forever I was going to live in this. It changed my life. It changed who I was. And I thought forever I would live in this place of just being so grateful for the present and for the moment and so satisfied. I was so content. I was so satisfied. And this is years and years and years ago. And every year as I've stepped out of that world and into the real world where everybody else lives, I've become less content. Isn't that incredible? Isn't that crazy? And so when we talk about this thing for happiness, it's because as I've stepped away from that world and into the real world, I've gone back to the search for happiness that doesn't exist, to just be lucky or to look for a fleeting feeling of joy that's fickle. And it's not always peaceful. I've had two of the absolute worst years of my life 2 years ago. Absolutely worst years. I say this as somebody who's gone through my daughter's cancer, domestic violence, and these were the worst 2 years. For me, mentally just pushed me to the brink for personal stuff that eventually maybe I will talk about, not yet. Um, and so I've gone down that road further away from contentment. And so it's reminded me I need to turn around. I need to turn around and go back to being content, which consists, quote, in being satisfied with present conditions. Still being striving for bigger things that you want for tomorrow, still wanting to make those impact, but can I be present right now and satisfied right now with today? with how things are and content that I have choices, that I can make changes, that I can move forward. But right now I'm content. And so that is my question for you. What would it take for you to be content? And if you're struggling with that, put that in the comments. Let's talk about that. One of the things that I have for you, and if you put in the comments questions, I will send it to you. I have a free resource for you. It is a workbook. It's called 21 Questions to Reinvent My Life. And it is 21 questions or 20, not 21, 20 questions to ask yourself to reframe your life, to reclaim your life, and hopefully to reignite your life. I mean, that's my whole thing, right? Reframe, reclaim, reignite. And so if you're like, yeah, I'm really struggling, I'm constantly gonna be happy, I'm not feeling happy, then I'll give this to you. It is my gift to you. Just put questions in the comments, we'll send it to you, or DM me the word questions, I will get it to you. That might be better because sometimes if I DM you, might not get it if it goes to your spam or something. Um, but I want you to have these questions. I want you to be able to dive deep, ask yourself these thoughtful questions because our goal would be to get you from where you are into a place of deep contentment, where you are so satisfied with your present conditions that you have dreams, goals, want to experience more. Yes. But right now, today, you can say, I am content. And I think that's truly what we're striving for more than all of these other fickle feelings, that we are satisfied right now in today. We are okay with today. And how would life be different? And how would we show up different? I just think for myself, I would show up as a calmer, more patient, less judgmental, less angry, less anxiety driven. I mean, Jack would probably be a whole lot happier, right? Like if I was just, I'm really content right now. So this is one of the things that I'm bringing into the new year of going back to being that satisfied, going back to doing things like the gratitude journal, the sitting in the moment, listing the things that we have to be grateful for and realizing that for most of us, particularly if we live here in the US, for most of us, I would say the majority of us, and there are, of course, exceptions to people who are going through true horrific trauma. And I don't want to take away anything from that. I'm talking about the average person. The average person probably isn't in this moment. And um, I really believe that we would be able to uh, eradicate, maybe not eradicate, but certainly lower the amount of mental health crises that we are having in our country if more and more people could experience contentment versus an elusive, unattainable happiness. So I'm going to go work over with our Hey Girl You Can community today. Again, I'm going to be popping in a lot more live, guys, to share thoughts with you, to share what I'm reading in the latest research. I found a new study that I'm super fascinating to share with you. I'll hop in live and do that another day. But Thursdays, I'll be showing up live. So if you want to come here and join me and comment, right now, I will be recording this and then posting it on the LinkedIn and the YouTube, so you'll have access to it. I'm trying to figure out how to be able to stream live into all three places so that wherever your platform you're on, you'll be able to be live with me. Because what I'm hoping for, my goal is for you to be able to engage, to be able to have more of a conversation where you can comment, put your input in, put your thoughts in. I would love to hear from you. I'd love your thoughts on where you are. You guys know I'm all about community. I don't want to just come up here and talk to myself. I really want to get to talk with you. So I hope you have an amazing, amazing day. And I just encourage you to find contentment. And I will leave you, as I always do with every time I speak or do anything, they always say, do you have final thoughts? And my final thoughts are always the same. I read off my board that is here in my room. And it says, and this is always my prayer for everybody, that when I leave them, when I stand before God at the end of my life, I would hope that I would not have a single bit of talent left. And I could say I used everything you gave me. And that is by Irma Bombeck. That is my prayer for myself, that I use all of my talent that God gave me, but that is also my prayer for you, that you use all of the talent that God gave you, that you don't let those dreams die with you, that you pursue them, because that is your gift that you give the rest of us. So you guys have an incredible day.